Welcome, everybody. I'm Love Coach Scott Thomas.
And I'm Love Coach Trish Wright.
And welcome to Straight Talk. And we have a really important show tonight. We're going to be talking about one of the most kind of challenging areas of life because it's Straight Talk. We're going to dive straight into all about consent. And obviously we are living in a time, at least it seems obvious to most of us, we're living in a time that we're reevaluating everything. It's time to really look at ourselves, our culture, our society, and look at all the things that aren't working.
Yes.
And celebrate that which is working, but really reevaluating our social and racial justice issues. Obviously, the Me Too movement brought a lot of things to light. And consent is a very tricky topic, and we are really blessed that we have Betty Martin, who's probably, I would say, the world's foremost respected teacher on consent. She created the Wheel of Consent, and she'll talk about that. And I also wanted to invite my friend Oshalla. She's been on our show before, because I wanted, frankly, to have somebody other than just white people talking about the issues of consent. And Oshalla is somebody I've known for a very long time, who has a tremendous amount of wisdom. So I'm going to bring you right on. Here is Oshalla, and here is Betty Martin. And welcome to Straight Talk.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you.
And
Blessings.
yeah, a reminder that we love hearing from people in the audience. Also, welcome to the people in our Zoom room. And so we've got some 3 of our regular fans and friends. So Celeste, Mark, Nancy, love to hear your thoughts, comments, and questions, and we'll bring them in. And for those of you watching live on Facebook, come on into our Zoom room. In a few minutes, I'll pop the Zoom room number in, and you're welcome to come on. And this is where it's a little easier to interact with us.
Sorry.
You find her?
Yeah, I did.
Okay. And what does consent mean to you? What would you like, and this is to the audience, but then also, of course, to Oshalla and Betty, what does consent mean? And what do we need to really understand around consent? So that's the questions that we'll tackle initially. And if you want to introduce Betty, I'm going to put the spotlight on you, Betty.
So for those of you who don't know Betty Martin, she is the founder of the Wheel of Consent. And this particular work has literally shifted the way that we relate to each other. A lot of people have taken your beautiful work and really like danced with it and created something beautiful. And it's so foundational. So I do just want to read a little bit about, gosh, Betty, you have so much that you've offered in your life. So
I've been around a while.
Thank goodness.
Like Scott was saying, I've had time to accumulate a lot of experiences.
It's a wonderful blessing to being a little bit older, isn't it, Betty?
Yeah.
A chiropractor, somatic respiratory integration, educational kinesiology, Reiki, neuro-emotional integration, body-based erotic education. You're a tantric massage therapist, a sexological body worker. You have worked with Byron Katie and developed cuddle parties and nonviolent communication. You are just magic.
Thank you.
I miss anything.
Those are some of the things I've done. What I'm actually most proud of is being a whore.
Is what?
Is being a whore.
Yay!
I've been a sex worker for a number of years. I'm mostly retired from that now. And whore is a word that has had many others reclaimed with a great deal of love and respect, because of the generosity that it requires.
I'm sure that you know her. One of my dear friends is Annie Sprinkle. And
Oh, yes.
Annie and I went to junior high school together.
Oh my gosh.
We met as adults, and we were doing a video shoot, and we were talking, and she said, "Where did I grow up?" I said, "I grew up in Granada Hills." She goes, "I grew up in Granada Hills. How old are you?" The same age. She brought in the next day to the studio her junior high school yearbook, and we were on the same page.
Oh my gosh, that's too much.
So, and Annie is someone else who just, like yourself, celebrates that profession. So I figured you got to
Absolutely.
know Annie, so I had to jump in there.
Thank
You know,
you.
I'm a really big proponent and a big activist. I'm pro sex work in so many ways, because I think that, gosh, I mean, if you've ever sat down to talk to a sex worker, ever, we are all so powerfully committed to humanizing each person, to being in that place of communication and connection, because that's what people really want. It's a lot of work. It's emotionally connected, and the depth there that people offer is just, it's powerful.
Thank you.
Transformative power of, and it's not just physical connection, and that's mostly not, people don't even come to see you for physical connection.
That's
It's
very
really
often true.
depth of the intimacy, the nakedness. I'm going to use this term, nakedness, of really
Yeah.
like being able to be seen in your truth.
Yep. That's very often true.
Yeah.
Yeah.
The reason why this is such a powerful show for me, and please bring Oshalla on.
I'll bring
because
Oshalla
I was going to say, I want to meet Oshalla.
So it's interesting because Betty, I appreciate what you're saying, and I have definitely, and I want to hear more where you're coming from, because I feel like I'm looking at where you're coming from, and then from a whole different perspective of whore and hoe
Yes.
Yeah.
and bitch and mama,
Yeah.
and being coming from a community where oftentimes that's who we were. We were just assumed to be able to be, that's who we just were. We didn't have a choice to do that. And the economic, conditions and being owned, coming out of that legacy, and then coming through the system of being looked upon as just chattel, that whole issue, and growing up in my community, with the notion of pimps and hoes, and also seeing what that's done to our community and our families. And then also, I walk in both worlds. So I certainly don't speak for all Black folks, but I do speak for, I've been around a long time myself. And so I do speak for several communities, and Scott knows, he knows where I grew up and how I grew up, and also where I evolved to. So I can also speak to that tantric woman power and the feminine power of being in your own. So I can see both sides, but I think it's really important in this conversation to really get where Black women specifically were just used.
Yes.
And didn't always have that choice of claiming their wholeness.
Yes.
So I just have to really say that that's
Thank
a real
you.
part.
I'd love to hear Betty's response to that. That was really powerful, and that's why you're here, Oshalla. Thank you. That's exactly what I was. It's like, we got to bring Oshalla into this conversation.
Yes.
Yeah. Yeah, it's true. I speaking as a kind of modern day chosen sex work as a calling, it's a privileged place, because because I had enough financial stability to not work on the street, work out of my studio. I could say no to clients that I didn't feel safe with. That's an incredible, that's a privilege. And not everybody has those choices. And not every barista or farm worker or office worker has those choices. Some, many people work in terrible conditions, whether it's sex work or any other kind of work. And Oshalla, as you said, the legacy of being owned and assumed that you're available even if you're not is really sucks.
And amazing how that legacy continues. And then even having to deal with that in our own, communities. So like I said, I see it from both sides. I mean, I really honor the, the workers in the trades, and that has lifted up, as women have been able to be lifted up, being able to have safer, consensual environments. And I appreciate that. So that's lifted it up for all women. But so often, just as in the feminist movement, there was a whole different conversation that Black women had than white women had. And that became very revealed, because one was coming from a place of privilege. We weren't talking about the right to work. It was just happened. So I would say the consent in this particular subject is different. And I think that really needs to be expressed. I remember when I first saw the, what was it? And Scott, you may know, it was a camp. I don't remember who was doing it. It was called Goddesses and Sluts and Goddesses, right? I remember that. Do you remember that?
I do remember that.
And I remember thinking, wow, they can just do anything they want to do. It's legal.
Yeah.
We would be all up in the jailhouse.
Yeah.
I mean, seriously, straight up.
Yeah.
So it just was, just to see that difference. It was like, wow, this is deep.
Yeah.
So, So I just had to put that little 2 cents in there.
Yeah. Thank you. Absolutely.
Thank you for bringing this up, because this is part of how, this is truly where I believe how we got to look at consent these days, right? Is that for centuries we've been celebrating white women's sexuality, and we've been really suffocating Black women's sexuality. And it really does look like that. So when I told Scott, I was like, I really want a conversation on consent, because there's an evolution that's happening in our world, right? We have to get even more defined, and we have to bring our voices, and we have to amplify your voice, and we really get to choose how consent it equalizes for all of us, right? So just to throw it out to both of you is, how can we bring a more like an equality through the consent conversation here? Because consent, even in the like tantric BDSM fields, is expanding greatly in the last even couple years. And I'd love to see, have a conversation a little bit between all of us around how.
I have a question before we go there. I got a little introduction, and you heard about me. I'd love to hear about Oshalla. Would you tell us a little bit about you?
Well, I mean, so much of what I do is overground and underground. So Scott, why don't you Scott's known me for a long time. He's seen some of the things I do. I'm looking forward to like kind of writing, and then that way I won't have to talk so much about who I am and what I've done.
So my experience of Oshalla, so I'm not going to talk about where she went to college or what books she wrote. I'm going to talk about Oshalla's spirit and her dedication to truth and integrity, but doing it with love and joy. She's a dancer, and she dances through life, but she's also very dedicated to her community. And she grew up in Marin City, which is a very unique community. And I remember I can remember when I first met you, Oshalla, and you were telling me that there were people who were adults in your community who had never been to San Francisco. And San Francisco is about a 20-minute.
San Rafael. They might have gone to San Francisco, but not San Rafael. So very different distinction.
Yeah.
Because San Rafael has a whole different connotation than when San Francisco.
Right.
At least San Francisco then. Now San Francisco has kind of gotten more like San Rafael, but different.
But she's stayed, even though she's had a lot of success in many different parts of her life, she's always stayed committed to her community. And she's now created co-created an incredible arts center there. where she is empowering a wide variety of people, everything from young people to artists. She introduced me to this beautiful artist who had been in prison for decades. Came
41 years.
41 years.
Wow.
41 years.
The painter, right?
And
What is his name?
Lumumba.
Lumumba.
Mm.
And just getting his art out there, both in a physical art gallery and online. Oshalla is dedicated to people and dedicated to really loving people well. I'm tearing up here a little bit. And thank you, Betty, for making sure that we gave an introduction to Oshalla also.
And Scott knows that I've seen the work Ghost Hand. I was the, resident of the Love Temple, and so I am very familiar with the New Age community that's mostly white, and then also very, very much committed and walked in and continue to walk in my community and the holistic health community. So growing up in Marin County, but then also growing up in a Black community that was seeded generationally from people from the South. So I have lived in those two worlds.
Thank you. Well, I'm really glad to meet you.
So, consent. One of the things that Betty has created that has become a model that many people use, just like Marshall Rosenberg created a model for nonviolent communication. Betty created something called the Wheel of Consent, which has been a model that's used a lot by people in the mostly white New Age spiritual community. That's absolutely where it mostly is, but it's been incredibly valuable. And so in many ways, just as Marshall was the father of compassionate communication, Betty has in many ways been the mother, if you will, of really understanding the wheel of consent, understanding the various dynamics of consent. And so, Betty, I'd love for you to just kind of share a little bit about that.
Yeah, I can give you the 3-minute version. Are you familiar with that, Oshalla?
I'm not, so please give me the 5-minute version, because I'd like to.
We got a version here.
I want to hear it.
Well, the Wheel of Consent, it's a model and it's a practice, and it's a practice in taking turns. So you're either receiving a gift or giving a gift, and you're doing them one at a time instead of mixing it all up together. So it doesn't replace your life. It doesn't mean that you have to always be doing one or the other, but it's a practice in taking them apart so that either it's totally for you, you're receiving this gift that you've asked for, and you're attending to your own pleasure and not worrying about the other person. Or you're giving, in which case you're responsible for your boundaries, of course, but you're putting the other person first, and that's the gift that you're giving. So it's a practice in taking, receiving, and giving apart. And the reason that taking those apart is useful is because you have experiences that are possible no other way. So that's the basis of it. And it happens that when I'm receiving a gift from you, I can either receive a gift of something that you're doing to me or for me. So maybe I've asked for a back rub, you're giving me a back rub, or some, touch is the easy way to learn it, so I use touch. Or it could be that you're giving me the gift of allowing me to do what I want. So maybe I want to play with your hair, or maybe I want to explore your ears, or maybe I want to feel your back, or maybe I want to play with your hands, for example. So in that case, you're giving me the gift of letting me do what I want. So it recognizes there's these two different dynamics. Either I'm doing what you want, or I'm doing what I want, or you're doing what I want, or you're doing what you want. And so the wheel of consent did not invent consent. You already know that consent's a good thing, and you already know that it can be hard to notice what you want and communicate what you want and say yes and no and set limits and all that stuff. A lot of people are teaching that. I did not invent that.
Yes.
The piece that the wheel of consent brings to the conversation is that not only does consent, or not only does your agreement include what we're going to do or not do, but it includes who it's for.
Yes.
So I may be running my hand down your back, but is it what you want or is it what I want? And what's the difference? And what difference does it make? And how does it feel different? And what kind of different agreement do we need to make for each of those? And we need times in both of those dynamics. And so it's a practice of basically saying, will you or may I, and being able to tell the difference between those.
Betty, I'm a visual person, and I've used this many times. So I'm actually pulling up on my screen.
Oh, there you go.
There it is.
There you go.
Yeah.
Yep, that's it.
And one of the things that I really appreciate is that you have established the shadow side.
Mm-hmm.
And
can you make that so it's not the whole screen?
Let me do that. I'm going to go back to you and let me make it so that we have the whole screen as your wheel. I don't know why. I think if I close this.
Something I just want to, while we're working on this, what I love about the ownership of what you want and taking or hearing, conversing about the ownership of wants. And I think that this is one of the pieces that is so important. When, like, who is this for? Who is this for? So when I'm saying, hey, Betty, I really want to give you a hug. Well, who's this for? It's for me.
Yeah.
And this person, you might be like, I don't know you. I don't really want to give you a hug. But we can negotiate reality together in this way.
Yeah.
Like, hey, I don't want to hug you. Is it the touch that you're looking for? Is there an aspect of connection or intimacy that you're looking for? Because I don't want to touch you physically. It's so powerful to hear someone's ownership of what they want and receive it, or give consent to it lovingly, deny it, or really welcome it.
Yeah.
And that was one of the most powerful, profound things for me, because this consent piece, I've been in the BDSM scene for a very long time, and nobody really had the conversation around who's this for. And especially when you play in power dynamics and things like that, when you're like, well, this is for the dom. Well, not really. A lot of things are for the sub a lot of the time. And just playing in these dynamics is like, oh, how do we get what we want in relationship to another person?
Yeah.
In whatever community that we're in whatever, and also the consent pieces, as we start to dissolve some of the aspects in this world around the filters in which we live through, right? Like, we really have to become more aware of how we impact the other person with our wants and needs, and how we hear them and hold them.
Yeah. And really, it's pretty weird for white people to be teaching consent.
I agree.
It just is.
Betty, I'm glad you said that, because I'm going to comment on something that Nancy said that I completely agree with, Nancy. I think that one of the things that I always do when I lead DEI workshops, diversity, equity, and inclusion workshops, I co-facilitate. So I always ask people, who are your people, right? There is no such race as Black or white. That is it's uniquely American, but it's become a you know, that the whiteness has its own history, and that's a whole nother program. Okay.
Yeah.
And Black was a response to that, actually a reaction to that.
Mhm.
So it's very political. The term white and Black is a very political thing. My man is from Cameroon, right? He didn't become a Black man until he came to America.
Right.
Right, because it's so racially charged here. And when I ask people oftentimes, who are your people? And I often get, you know, Filipino, Mexican, Kenyan, Cameroonian. Where I often find difficulty, or when people have difficulty, is often Euro Americans have a really hard time reaching into who their people are, which is like for ancestry, like for us as African people, that's like a real important question. But it's also painful for African Americans because there was so much erasure, so much of elimination of who we were as people. I think that consent, if I want to loop that back around to consent, kind of that who you are is so closely related to then, you know, who is your essential who are you? And so I think that kind of beginning this whole conversation with, we stand on the shoulders. Whose shoulders are we standing on? I know I always proudly say I stand on the shoulders of my ancestors that are in the diaspora, all over the diaspora and from the African continent, and, you know, specific. And so just even now my curiosity is like, who are your people, Betty? And, you know, and how did, you know, that is a conversation that I feel that can be brought up more in the New Age community, is people really looking at who are their people, to expand all the other conversations that we have, whether it's consent or, you know, what that is. So it's not just a black and white conversation.
Absolutely.
And I just was addressing Nancy because she wrote that in there. So I wanted to acknowledge that comment in the panel questions or comments.
We're still working on pulling up a copy of the wheel. For some reason, it keeps wanting to have all that stuff on the side.
Bye, honey.
So we'll pull that up in a moment. So bringing it to most relationships, what are some of the questions that you think are best for people to ask? I know that when I did a lot of work, in fact, with Oshalla, we did a lot of work for teenagers, and we did several shows on responsible sexual decision making. And one of the primary themes of the shows that we did, and these shows reached a lot of kids, millions of them. We did stage plays in schools, high schools all over the country, and then television versions. And in fact, Oshalla won an Emmy Award for one of the shows that we did. Anyway, on the responsible sexual decision-making show, our theme was, if you're not old enough to talk about it, you're not old enough to do it. Which, of course, is applicable to adults as well, right?
Well, let's see. I'm 70. Does that?
Oh, girl, looking good, looking good, looking good. Come on now, looking good.
So you'd think I'd be old enough to talk about it, but it doesn't mean that I am.
But so in consent, though, isn't it true that still we struggle to talk about it? And
of course.
Most of the couples I work with, you know, before they become a couple, the first times they have sex, they're under the influence. They've gotten stoned. They've had alcohol. Haven't talked about, what does this mean? What does kissing mean to you? What does having intercourse mean to you? What does spending the night mean to you? And so how can we have consent if we haven't even had basic communication?
Can we also expand the conversation of consent outside of intimate relationships and sex? Because I think that's also like,
absolutely.
For me, I'm always into consensual conversations. Like, Betty, Oshalla, I have something I want to talk to you about. Do you have space and time? And even bringing consent to an even like further pulled back conversation. So.
Yeah. So would you say that that's kind of where this and nonviolent communication connect, right? Because your consent wheel, Betty, looked very much like it reminded me of nonviolent communication, because in nonviolent communication, you ask permission, right? Can I ask you a question, or can I talk to you about something, right? So it looks like there's some links there.
Yeah,
Yeah, probably.
when
Yeah.
we practice consent, like, so I mean, just if I can riff for just a second, if we can practice consent early on, especially in teaching our children how to think about their impact on another person, and that's somewhat of my definition of consent in this human, after years of my own experience, is that when we can start having conversations around consent, around toys, or communication, or getting our needs met in some manner, then that's where we can really start to find more confidence in in having sexual conversations, right?
Were you able to pull that up, Scott?
We're working on it.
Okay, because I have it here. If you'll let me share my
Yeah, if you
screen.
could, yeah, you've got screen share privilege, so you can do
Okay.
that.
Okay.
There you go. Thank you.
Thank you.
Yeah. I just happen to have it handy. So, yeah, just a kind of primer or explanation. The wheel of consent, you see there's an axis for who's doing, it goes up and down, and an axis for who it's for, and that goes across, and they overlap. So it creates quadrants of serving, I'm doing, but I'm giving a gift. So I'm doing what you want me to do. I'm rubbing your back, I'm massaging your feet, I'm getting you a drink of water, I'm taking you to the airport. So the other partner will be an accepting, which is you're doing what I want you to do. So to create the serve accept dynamic, the question is, will you? Yes, I will. Will you rub my feet? Yes, I will. Will you bring me some tea? Yes, I will. Will you help me carry in the groceries? Yes, I will.
Mhm.
So that's this one. And the other dynamic is I'm in taking, which means I'm the one who's doing, and it's for me, it's a gift for me. So the other person isn't allowing. So taking starts with may I? May I play with your feet? May I borrow your truck? May I explore your back? May I feel your butt? May I come over and use your hot tub?
Mhm.
Yes, you may. Yes, you may. Yes, you may. So if you're in the doing half, if you're in the doing half, it's either you're doing what you want or you're doing what they want.
Yes.
You can also look at the done to half. Either you're being done to the way you want or you're being done to the way they want. And of course, you still get to have your boundaries. It doesn't mean that you throw them out the window. And in the receiving half, you're receiving a gift. It's for you, something you've asked for. You can receive the gift of access to the person, or you can receive the gift of their action. Two different kinds of gifts, but they're both gifts. And if you're giving a gift, you can be in serving, you're giving the gift of your action, or in allowing, you're giving the gift of access to you, you're giving the gift of your body. So there's two ways to give, there's two ways to receive. And yeah, so that's the nutshell. Yeah. And again, a lot of these, the model comes from the experience of asking hundreds of people, how do you want me to touch you, and how do you want to touch me?
Yes.
And noticing where they got stuck and where they got lost and all the different experiences that came out of that. Yeah, that's where it came from.
Can I ask you some questions about it?
Mm-hmm.
How much of this is informed by your sex work?
It all is.
I just want to make a little plug for those sex workers.
Well, I shouldn't say it all is. It's primarily is. I have other relationships that are not sex work related, and I've learned from them as well. And it came from a game called the 3 Minute Game, which was developed by Harry Faddis. of the body electric school. And I learned it at a body electric school workshop, this little game called a 3-minute game. What do you want to do to me for 3 minutes? What do you want me to do to you for 3 minutes? And that's where this all came from. And because I played it with hundreds of clients, and I just began to notice more and more and kind of refine it. I noticed essentially that, wait a minute, in 2 of these things I'm doing, but in one of them it's for me and one of them it's for you. So what's the difference? And that's where it came from.
It's brilliant.
I'm curious for you, Oshalla, as you look at this for the first time, because it's something that we're familiar with. How does that land for you? And what do you notice? And is the language relatable? And do you think it would be relatable for the non-white community?
I'm looking at this wheel, Betty, and what I'm seeing is that a lot of our dualistic existence, like in this prophesized time of the last 500 years, has been on the doing side. A lot of serving and a lot of taking, right?
Yep.
And not as much allowing and accepting and just across the board. So that's the first thing that stuck out for me. So those shadow sides have thrived in that doing model.
Yeah.
And well, let me see, doing, what is under the, can you go up because underneath they are doing.
Yeah.
So it seems they are doing, and it seems that is why there is so much pushback around what they are doing, right? There hasn't been, at this point, and I do believe that we are in time of prophecy where things are shifting and changing, where we are, looking at the other area of the wheel. I don't even like to think in terms of one side or the other. I do like to look in terms of that circle of evolution, because if you're on one side or the other, you're taking a side. But if you're on one point of the wheel, it depends on where you are on the wheel at any given time. So I'm looking at your diagram from the perspective of, where am I on the wheel going around this way? But it's clear that upper part of the wheel that we have, that this world civilization has really been dominant on the doing end.
Yeah, that's.
That's just my observation.
Well,
would you say that?
Yeah, I would totally agree that this dominant culture is doing. Absolutely. This diagram is more about a dynamic between, or in its simplest form, it's about a dynamic between 2 people. And it came out of touch, but it applies to more than touch. So so it's really a diagram of what's happened when 2 people or touch each other or have some other interpersonal dynamic. And it applies to the world as a whole. And the dynamic, ideally, is created by the agreement. So if I say, may I come over and borrow your truck? And you say, yes, now we have an agreement. And I'm in take and you're in allow. If I say, will you bring me some tea? And you say, yes, I will. That agreement creates a dynamic. And it's serve accept. You're doing something for me. So in its simplest form, that's what it is. In a larger form, looking at civilization as a whole, that's a really good point, that we're a civilization of doing.
Yes.
And that seems pretty clear too. And we are a civilization in which what we have done is taken advantage of other people and other people's labor. And, we still do it in so many ways. And you know, you're dropping bombs on some village across the world because you want something that they have and you haven't asked them for it.
Right.
You're just going to take it.
Yes.
And so, yeah.
Do you feel that, so I get that what you're saying with dissent, with this wheel, that it is more on the interpersonal. And so, and I get that because I do feel that change, yes, a lot of the larger picture is systemic,
Yeah.
but that daily change, at the end of the day, the system is, you're coming home to your partner.
Yeah.
You have relationships with individuals. There's a lot that we can do
Yeah.
in those relationships. You know, I mean, you know, we often call it what, mother wit, common sense, treating somebody right. You know, it's
Yeah,
like, did your
yeah.
mama raise you right? You ask
Yeah.
somebody before you take something,
Yes,
right?
yes.
Those basic common sense things that don't seem so common.
Don't know.
But I get that this is something that, you know, being taught. You know, we had a children's retreat with 5-year-olds and 7 years old, and one thing that we were illustrating to the children was asking them, you know, having them, when someone's not feeling good, what can they, you know, what can they do? Like we say, okay, well, maybe you can ask them if they'd like a hug, or ask them if they would, you know, like, you know, to have their back rubbed. Or, and so it's funny that you're saying this, is because that's exactly what this group of parents and young children were doing. Like the children, we were encouraging the children to ask, what did that person want if they bumped their knee?
Yeah.
Like, wow, what
Yeah.
can I do,
Yeah.
you know, to help you? Or do you want me to do anything? And
Yeah.
so just, you know, really sharing with them our responsibility as elders to really help them with who they already are, which is just love.
Yeah.
Right. They don't need that much. They don't really need that much coaching around that, but they do follow us if we're being selfish, and it's like mine, right?
Yeah.
They'll go there. So so I appreciate that you're focusing on the interpersonal, and and the global does affect that. If you, when Scott asked me to be on this program, you know, he was speaking from that position of kind of that Me Too movement, and, you know, and those kind of some global dynamics that he wanted me to sit with. And that is that specifically Euro men. And even though I see someone that, you know, keeps writing in chat that, you know, there's, yes, I get it. Race is completely invented. I get it. We're all coming, you know, it wasn't, folks weren't running around just, but it has been used, certainly. And we've been under that thumb. And I would say a good 500 years. And I would say that it was prophesied. So we can't ignore that that is the case. We can't ignore that there are certain dynamics that we all know. It's the elephant in the room, and we can't ignore that those things exist. So, yeah, because if we ignore it, then, you know, we're just, you know, we're not, you know, able to deal with that stuff.
That is what we've done. We've been ignoring it for so long.
Well, we white folks have.
Yeah.
That's an option that's not available to people of color.
Yeah.
I imagine.
So I have a question, and we could look at it from a global, you know, white race and what we've done to people that we've enslaved, or we can look at it in just individual relationships. Where does restoration come in to the wheel of consent, or into your work, Betty? Where does, when there has been a tremendous lack of consent, and now we're trying to balance the scales, do we swing in the opposite direction? Or what are some of the thoughts or ideas that you, and certainly then Oshalla, have about restoration?
Do you mean restoration, or are you thinking reparation? Or are you saying
Well,
restoration?
really, in a way,
purpose?
both. I was thinking restoration, but
Restoration
actually,
of integrity.
but the word, yeah, restoration of integrity, restoration of the relationship. But yeah, no, definitely
Yeah.
restoration.
Both of the root of those words are, one is repair and the other is restore.
Restore. Yeah.
I mean, restore feels better
Yeah.
to me, in that, because when I close my eyes and I think of the term restore, I feel refreshed.
Yeah.
It's like a restorative, like, repair. Yeah, I feel a little more, okay, that was broken, let's fix it. Right. And I mean, and both are true. I don't mind pulling out my warrior self, peaceful warrior, whatever, but definitely restoration, what you ultimately said, does feel like a smoother word
Yeah.
that I'd like for Betty to comment on.
Yeah. Well, the wheel of consent doesn't have a recipe for restoration, other than it gives you a model for understanding where you've been. So if you can see that, oh, I was taking action for my benefit without regarding the effect on the other person. If I was over here in this corner, it just helps you see where you were.
Mhm.
I don't have a formula for making amends and restoring. Many people much smarter than I have developed those kinds of things. But where the wheel of consent can be helpful is seeing where on this wheel you were. Oh, I was over here taking advantage of someone, or oh, I was over here allowing someone to take advantage of me in a way that I could have stopped, or in a way that I could not stop, or I was taking advantage of someone's action that they were doing for me, or oh, I was overgiving. I was giving too much and I wasn't saying no, or I was forced to give too much and I didn't have the opportunity to say no. So that could be helpful.
Yeah.
How I
But I don't have a teaching about a restorative process. Many people smarter than
Betty,
I.
we were counting on you tonight to resolve 500 years
sorry.
of racial injustice. Come on.
Oh, that's what you're going for.
you
Dang.
know, Betty, I want to speak just, take it back to the micro. I think every woman has had the experiences, of what it's so deep, because, I mean, I had some really bad things happen to me when I was like 10 years old, right? With a group, like, it wasn't a rape, but it was definitely like, just a traumatic experience of, like, the boys pulled my pants down, physically dragged me onto an edge of a cliff, and it was just very traumatic. What was the deep thing about that, and the deep thing about coming from small towns, is that I have been able to, I mean, there's a few things, and when we talk about restoration, is, first of all, I had to go to high school with several of those people, right? Had to be in their face. There was a whole double sense of that violation happening, because I was afraid to tell my mother that it happened, right? And so when they then realized that I wasn't telling anybody, then it became like teasing, right? So I just retreated. And then, but thank goodness, I think the whole experience helped me get into the arts. Because it's like I just retreated into myself, and then, came out into other areas. But later, and I would say just in the past 5 years, at least 3 of those men, one of them, we were at an event, and I was hosting. He came over to me and he put a chair down in front of me, and he said, "I have to tell you, I'm so sorry." This is 50 years later.
Wow.
And he said, and he was the little boy that they were trying to push on me. because all the older kids were trying to push them on me. Now talk about lack of no consent there, right?
Yeah, no.
You know, and these were boys. So, you know, they were 16, 17 years old, the older boys, and they were young too, but still just that whole era of, you know, so that restoration, he said that he really started, he said, I have thought about that almost every day.
Oh, wow.
Because I had a crush on you. I really liked you. You know, I really liked you. And they were teasing me about how can, you know, we're going to hook you up. We're going to get you closer to her. So they were using him as a little 10-year-old boy.
Yeah.
To attack this girl.
Yeah.
But for me, growing up, having to go to high school and then growing up, being able to just have my own restoration with just healing, because you can't always expect other people to come to your aid or to your defense. That's one way of restoration, so that you just really, that you know that God is there for you. You can't control other people, but when that happens, and that sense, and how the reason that he said that came up for him is that he was in the military and he got raped.
Whoa.
And he said that, you know, and he said, when that was happening, I thought of you. And so how vulnerable that was for him to share that story with me was extremely deep. And then I've had, you know, and I have had other similar conversations with some of those same boys, now men, that have had different conversations, of course, because we all knew each other, right? So these kind of things where we're all kind of in each other's face, like talk about teaching lessons around reparations and restoration and repair and emotional, because I feel like in me being able to rise into my arts and rise into myself, and to fly, like I was able to fly, even if some of it was blocking things out, because I didn't remember a lot of things. That was the spirit protecting me from those memories. But later they came back. So I would say this whole issue of consent, that a lot of people just, you know, there's been a lot of not consent. And so there's a lot of people that are walking around wounded. And so that question of restoration, and what do we do if the people aren't around to restore? Because they are, most of the time, they're not going to be.
No. And a lot of the time they're probably unaware that what they've done, or
exactly.
I love this conversation, and I'd love to share a little bit about why this conversation's been so important to me.
Great.
I've moved through multiple experiences in my life where, similar to you, Oshalla, but I've had hold on, I have a mustache. I have to get off screen to get rid of my mustache.
Oh.
I'm Nancy. I'm so sorry. I'm going to use a word that you just don't like. That, you know, I've moved through and worked through, transformed through 2 rapes from 2 people that I really loved and adored. One was a fatherly figure, and one was a really close friend. And as I look back now, I mean, like, years of nightmares and PTSD triggers and just like full on fucking terror to be able to, it pushed me in the direction to find transformation, to find empowerment in those places. Like I had to, or I would have just suffocated. Right. And so as I started to grow through some of these, like, you know, learning hypnotherapy and rebirthing and just finding different tools that really helped, I found sorry, Scott, can you actually look forward?
Yeah.
I just need you to look forward. That finding the tools
Oh.
of the empowerment here of finding your tool, Betty,
Mm,
was really important for me because I
yeah.
saw it as under self-awareness, right? Oh my God, these are the places where I was living in my codependent patterning,
Mm-hmm.
social codependent patterning, and white supremacist, white rapey culture. Like
Mm-hmm.
I'm participating in these ways. And that was
Mm,
like an aha for me. Like, oh shit.
mhm.
Ah! And from that place, moving into, so it is a self-awareness, for me, self-awareness piece that I've used, as well as a preventative maintenance piece.
Mhm.
And then I found other tools for finding, like, where we're trying to, I think with consent, this is how I understand it to be, is that we're doing our best to eliminate, or not eliminate, but harm reduction, reduce as much harm as we possibly can. In the past, I've been really cavalier in my needs and I have hurt people. So I'm going to take a step back and
Mhm.
breathe through and ask for more, or ask for
Yeah.
less, or what do you want?
Yeah.
Or get curious about it.
Yeah.
And one of the things that I most recently, I do want to share a couple pieces about what the cool little consent practice that I've been doing. You know, there's all these acronyms and little things that you can use. But the one that I found most effective these days is RBDSMAI. Have you heard this?
Hmm.
So I'm just going to run through it kind of quickly. So R stands for relationship status, especially for all of us who are living in California. Relationship status is kind of a big thing.
So just let's give context
Yeah,
for a
so-
second, dear.
yeah.
The context being when people are meeting before they go into connection, these are the questions to ask.
Yeah.
Gotcha.
Just want to give that
Yeah,
context.
a connection, whether it's sexual or whether it's some sort of relational. I found this really helpful, just even in some, like there's a couple pieces you can lose, but even in just like meeting new friends at the, wherever you might be, especially at the bar or where, you know, or at a festival, like,
Mhm.
oh, these are really helpful. So your relationship status and what are the other person's boundaries? So if you have, or if you're in an non-monogamous, polyamorous conversation, do you have other ties? Who are
Mhm.
you dating, even if you're single,
Mhm.
monogamous, and you're dating others? Like who else thinks that there's connection here? And how do we show up and honor their humanness in this place? And then B, boundaries, which is really important. You know, again, having enough self-awareness to be like, hey, you know, I don't like this kind of play. I don't like it when someone touches my throat, or I don't like it when someone objectifies women. I just don't like it. Please don't do that. That's going to be like, in general, I will probably facepalm you. D, desires. And these can be even you can use them even in friendships, right? So what are your desires here? What are the desires that you have in this relationship, in this connection, in this friendship, in this sexual experience? Meaning is the M. What is the meaning of this connection or this experience? So if we all go out for lunch tomorrow, what is the meaning that we're going to make of this? Are we now best friends? Am I now required to like,
Now we're on a date.
oh, it's been a while. Yeah, exactly. So what is the meaning? And then there's A, aftercare. What do you need after the fact? What's going to happen after we, like the business meeting? What happens after this? Do I need to, you know, send you an email? Am I going to call you? Or do you just want to like never see me again? And then one thing that I wanted to really
Wait, wasn't there an S in there?
Oh, yes. This one can be dropped. Sorry, BDS. Yeah.
Yeah.
Thank you for bringing that in. S is sexual health.
Mm.
And for like, if you're just, you know, working or friendships or whatever, that one can be dropped. But sexual health is a really important conversation. And I think that it's often dropped because of shame.
Sure.
Like it's dropped all the time. And I think that impressing that that's a really big piece of like being brave enough to share your sexual experiences with whoever you're going to have sex with and your friends.
Well, and you know, also just given the culture we're living in now, it doesn't have to just be sexual health. Let's face it. What's your belief system and status on getting vaccinated?
Oh
I
yeah.
mean, that is such a big thing.
Oh,
You know, I mean, there's the people that are vaccinated, and if you're not vaccinated, you're an irresponsible son of a bitch.
right. All that judgment, all that
Right. And if
judgment.
you are anti-vaxxers, it's like, you've got Bill Gates now swimming around in your body. You
No,
know?
now I'm magnetic.
Yeah.
Right.
I can pick up 5G with my teeth.
Right.
Yeah. So,
Yeah.
And the
Yeah.
last one, I mean, that's such a good point. And the last one is intoxication. And this is something that I thought was really, really important. And I also want to expand this particular one, not just to alcohol or drugs, but to heightened states of awareness.
Yeah.
When you're triggered or when you're emotional, like how are you actually, are you consenting to that? Like if someone trips my, something, like if someone says something to me and I'm all shaken up, is that a place where I'm going to give full authentic consent? Right. And so as we start to look at dissolving rape culture, which is the one aspect of white supremacist culture, I think, anyway, is like how we've developed these ways, is like it's really looking at how we can show up in a different way to each other, to take ownership of how we're behaving, as well as taking ownership of how we impact. And I'm curious a little bit about, how you guys took that and how that impacted you.
That's pretty thorough. And would that we were all that aware and communicative.
Yeah.
Well, that's why the acronym is really good.
Yeah.
Right?
Yeah.
It's like you have
That's
something
great.
that you can just be like, you want to play this game with me?
Yeah.
And what is the acronym again for each one of those? I mean, what is the total?
RBDSM AI.
RBDSMS.
Not the easiest acronym.
I know. I probably could. I mean,
It's, it's okay.
I mean, I've heard you say it.
Well,
It's
the
all right.
BDSM in the middle of it helps to,
Yeah.
I probably
Right.
word. I've sat for hours trying to think about that.
Mhm.
I learned the RBDSM part from ISTA and added a little bit extra because of, again, like the being in the tantric and touching the tantric and the BDSM worlds. Like there's got to be a little bit extra. And I thought that was really the thoroughness of it.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, that's nice.
I'm really invested in, as I want to change how okay, I'm going to.
Good for you. I just want to say good for you.
I want to change the world and I want to change the conversation, and I would like to do it on a larger scale. And I know that we're all here doing it. And I do think that starting here and each step, like this is why I really was invested in having both of you on the show, is like, we're changing the conversation. We have to show up to each other. And so it's like, if once we start showing up in our little communities, it's like when I go talk to my super square Montana parents about these types of things, it takes them years to dissolve some of these layers of their perception, just to get to a place of like, oh,
even the middle BDSB
impact.
Yes, right.
I have to think about my impact on another person and ask them questions. Whoa. I'm like, whoa. So, it's alive for me because of the things that I've experienced. And I know that, to be really honest, I know of maybe 2 people, men and women, that haven't had a sexual indiscretion happen to them, or they've participated in one without knowing. So it's like, we need to step back and change the conversation in our culture around consent and around the awareness of how we're behaving.
I think we can agree on that.
I want to say that I want to bring the element of community in, and looking at community and individualism view.
Yeah.
Right. When we're looking at things from the community perspective, that whole idea that things that happen are not just because they're happening to me as an individual. There's a societal link
Yes.
to what is happening. And as you mentioned with your parents, that disconnect, that what's happening is that people are walking around like this, totally different conversations. Like Scott, what you were saying about, people that are on the so-called right and on the so-called left, whatever that means, because there's a lot of stuff in between there. But one thing is that folks aren't even talking.
Yeah.
There's so many issues that really I could see here, I could see there. But if you're here and here, there's not going to be any communication. There's no circle. So in that community context, rites of passage, being able to be a little girl and to have your rites of passage, like in many African cultures, you have clear rites of passage when you're 7, when you're 14, when you're 21, right? Those are real sacred times where as a little girl, and I'm not talking about societies where there's mutilation and all that, there's plenty of healthy, very healthy contexts around being a woman on the African continent, and in other places of the world, that you have a vagina, right? And that this and the women around that have vaginas and relationships with that, or that are going to have children. And I know I'm talking real binary here, and I know that can be a whole thing, but I'm very binary, right? I mean, I believe in the metaphysics of masculine and feminine energy, and having a feminine body where, when I was 16, I walked around like this, started to develop breasts. I literally was carrying, it was a man that said, why are you walking around with your hands on, why are you walking around with your hands on your chest, right?
Yeah.
I mean, it was so crazy. And yet in my teenage mind, it was really not, or if having sex for the first time or having someone go down on me for the first time and like, why would you want to do that? That's nasty, really, like, why would you want to go down there? Right. And this is real talk where we're often raised to not, our private body parts. From a young age, we haven't been literally trained or gone through our rites of passage with other men, with other women. If men, when they're 7, those 7-year-olds are around those 14-year-olds and those 21-year-olds and those elders and those grandparents that then tell these young men, these are the things that are acceptable. These are the ways that you show up for this woman. And then the women and the young girls are learning something also. And, and I think that even in a non-binary world, there's still always masculine and feminine. That's nature. We can't change the dynamic of masculine and feminine energy. That is just nature. That's metaphysics of nature. But being able to learn at an early age, like, what is your responsibility for carrying this penis around with you, right? What is your responsibility for carrying this vagina around with you?
Yeah.
That, I don't really recall, because my mother then passed on all that other stuff that from the 50s. They didn't talk about it. Her mother didn't talk about it. So who's really teaching that? And then do we trust our schools to teach it? So I'm going to just jump out and just say that our societal responsibility as elders is to be able to have those conversations so that those little young 7-year-olds, 14, because 7 is a whole different thing. But when they get 14, it's like, wow, what to expect? I didn't know what to expect when I first had sex. I had my pants, I had my shirt off, my pants, only thing that was missing was my pants, and I still had my boots on, right? And a hat. Seriously. And all this sounds like deeply traumatic, but it was so normal that this is just the way that you were as a young girl, being around, boys that you liked, and you're supposed to act a certain way to boys that you like, buy them stuff, and all these other kind of things that are swimming in our culture. And those things are still around. And I know that they're still around because I talked to some young girls. So those
Yeah.
things are still around. So Betty, the consent, like being able to have the privilege to be a whore, for example, in the different, I want to say the different classes in terms of sex work, that those whores that are in the hotels or at their homes, or the hoes that are in the street, you know, and that are doing it. They don't want their children to know that they're doing it because they're doing it because they need to bring home some food.
Yeah.
I think the more that we come together as women for these young girls and really agree as women that these are some of the things that we're like the line helping them, and the men doing the same thing. So I just wanted to throw that out for anybody that wanted to comment on that.
Oshalla, thank you. That's exactly why I became a sex coach. That's exactly why I am invested in One Love Foundation, which teaches healthy relationship skills to young children. Like, this is why, because I want to be part of the conversation on comprehensive sex education in schools. Like, this is it. This is how we shift. This is how we shift the world and shift culture. Thank you. And it is a community responsibility, and it sucks because our white community, the way that we've developed it, is so severed from each other. We don't take responsibility for creating community or safety or understanding. We haven't done that. And that's why Betty creates the Wheel of Consent, so that we can have conversations around who's it for.
Yeah.
Because that's not what we have done in the past. And this is what we get to do in the future. The evolution of relationship, the evolution of consent, the evolution of sexuality and safety and community. Yeah. Yes, I'm super lit right now. This is so good.
Well, I and I'm just kind of kicking back as the white man here, the older white man. You know,
Watch your step there, Scott.
Yeah. Thank you. And I actually am going to kind of wrap us up fairly soon. So, I'd love to open it up to Betty and Oshalla to give final thoughts, and then we'll go to Betty, your website. And Oshalla, do you want us to
go to Oshalla.com, and that kind of takes them down the rabbit hole of what I'm doing, because otherwise
definitely going to that website after
Oshalla.com. Betty, someone typed in, because I know Nancy's been very active in the chat, but I said whores because you said that after you introduced yourself, you said that one of the proudest things that you were was being a whore. So I purposely, Nancy did not say escort, because Betty is the one who said she was proud of being a whore. She didn't say hoe. She said whore.
Yes. Right.
So I just want to clarify that was Betty embracing the whore in her. So let's put it up. Let's put it to Betty.
You can blame me for introducing that word to this conversation, and maybe this person missed it, but I was doing sex coaching. It was called Sacred Intimate at that time, and that's a word that was coined by other people. And erotic guide, all kinds of names, because I didn't really have a name for it. And but it was guiding people through erotic experiences and sexual experiences for them to learn something. And so, and it took me a while to really recognize that, oh, this is sex work. Oh, I'm a whore. Oh, look around at all these other fabulous people that are whores, and my lineage. So it's something that I learned to see the beauty and the power in sex work.
And I think it's important. And Nancy, I'd love for you to maybe stop writing for a minute and take this in. And thank you for all your contribution. But there's a reason we have these people here speaking. And one of the things I'm learning is that it's not up to me to judge when somebody else claims a word that maybe in our white privileged culture, we've decided, oh, that's a bad word. We're not going to use that word. But when Betty claimed it, it was an act of empowerment. And it's our own responsibility to see what our relationship is to that word. And you know what? Everybody else has a right to their relationship to a word, especially when it's a charged word, especially when it's triggered. I would not feel comfortable calling Betty a whore, but
Oh,
I feel
Scott.
very comfortable hearing her claim it. Now, after I've heard her claim it and know that she feels good about that, then we can be playful with it. So there's a difference between when we project it onto someone versus when they claim it as an act of empowerment.
That's true.
This is
Thank
also
you.
part of pronoun usage as well, and gender identities, and how we choose to identify, right? Identities, personality, ego stuff. It's like,
Yeah, and
Love the
words carry charges. That is just the way of it. And we all have different charges and different meanings that we attach to different words and all that. So that's okay. I haven't been reading the things because I can't do both at once. But yet to find me, bettymartin.org or wheelofconsentbook.com will also get you, and you can get a free chapter of the book at wheelofconsentbook.com.
Okay, so I'll go there in a moment. Here's your website, and of course we can go to the book. And here's how we get a free chapter.
Yep, there's get a free chapter.
There it is. But I like, oh heck, just go ahead and buy the book.
Well, just go buy the book.
Just buy the book.
I love that.
If you, but some people want to get a free chapter to see what it's about and all that stuff. That's fine.
There's my friend Annie.
Yeah.
My junior high school roommate. So beautiful. Thank you. And Betty, really, I appreciate you taking the time to be with us tonight. And it's always really cool. It's like, wow, I met Betty Martin tonight. And and you have a beautiful graciousness. I really want to acknowledge that. I'm experiencing you as very gracious.
Thank you.
Reminding me that I want to hear from what's Oshalla's bio. And
someone can pull up Oshalla.com. You can.
We got it here.
Can we see it?
You can pull it up. But Nancy, you are cracking me up in here when you said that Scott's brown. I was like, I'm looking at his pink shirt, and Scott is about as pink, white and pink. I'm sorry, Scott.
No, wait a minute. It's not a pink shirt. It's salmon.
Let's get that straight.
Let's be very clear. I don't wear pink. I wear salmon.
He's a salmon man.
The many shades of masculinity. It's okay.
But Nancy said you were kind of brown. I was like, I'm sorry, Nancy. He is not brown. I've known Scott for a long time. He's not brown. He's salmon. He's salmon. Okay. I think what I would like to say is, I want to invite people to come down to the MC Arts Gallery, which is in Marin City, and we definitely we have art classes. It is a gallery of the African diaspora, but we have something for everyone: crystals and incense and body purification things. Lots of art. There's Lumumba there, but if you go to the top of the page there where it says visit our Fair Trade Gallery boutique, right there in the blue, and you can see here's our gallery. There it is. That's the physical gallery.
So
and we just have something. We have classes and events, and it really is just a good time to step into just another slice of life. Someone had said, we were on a podcast, and someone says, oh my God, I could never imagine that there were so many artists in Marin City. And one of my artist friends said, well, we know that maybe you thought we were all pimps and hoes down there, but we do other things too. So one of them is art and other things. So, definitely there's a lot going on everywhere, and this is something we really believe in: local shopping, local supporting local businesses, and that includes local in other parts of the world too. We really do support small farmers and small vendors and other businesses, as well as our seniors. Many of the people in our group, this is dated, but we have a summer calendar,
All right.
and we really support our seniors, our elders,
Mm.
and our youth also around uplifting culture. And Betty, you know, what you're doing around languaging, and especially in communities where, as Trish was saying, that, you know, that just being aware that people are out there completely talking, like I can translate this conversation because Scott knows that I live in two different worlds, right?
Mhm. Mhm.
But there'll be some people, you know, coming out of my community be like, what in the hell are they talking about, right?
Yeah.
And so I think that, you know, the arts are really the bridge for us to be able to begin to, because we're all human
Mm.
and we all have sex, and we've all, and especially as women and men, we all know that push and pull that goes on, that whole issue of consent. You know, it gets tricky when you know that in my instance, that the African family, because of what's been going on, has been purposely attempted to be pulled
Mhm.
apart. So
Mhm.
then as a woman, then I'm dealing with my own stuff, and then having to look at my man and my son and their stuff too. And it's like, well, wait a minute, I'm valuable in this conversation too, but
Yeah.
feeling like we have to hold all that. And
Yep.
sometimes we do have to hold all that. And I'm not ashamed to say that as a woman, that sometimes it's okay to hold it. It's
Mhm.
okay to hold that. At the same time, being able to really educate our boys and our men that, you know, we can't just hold it all the time. You know, we can't. But
Yeah.
sometimes that deep part of us that yin part of us, you know, can hold it, but not forever.
Mhm. Mm.
Thank you, Oshalla.
Mm.
I love you so much. You know, I think we're getting close to we got to be past 40 years we've known each other.
That's a long
That's
time.
40
It's
years.
all
Oh, y'all aren't
relative.
old enough
Yeah.
for that.
Ah,
So looking forward
okay.
to the next 40 years with you, Oshalla.
Oh yeah, I'll be dancing.
You will be. You will be.
Yes, I will.
And I'll
I
be
sure
calling
will
you
be.
saying, this is what I'm producing.
Okay, what you doing, Scott? What you doing? What you doing over in the new age world? What are you doing now?
New age.
No, it's true though. Come on.
I got it. No, I'm there with you. Yeah.
Come on. It's the elephant in the room.
Yeah.
Come on.
Is
And Scott
it
knows that.
elephant in the room? No, I was a flower child. I went to 12 years old and saw Jim Morrison and was never the same. So
It's
I
all
love
good.
that.
And you know what? Thank goodness because the thing about the new age community that we often see in the African communities is that intention of love is there. You know, there's those intentions are there around that. And so that is very much appreciated. And so it's really about communication, and I do believe that arts are a way for us to be able to get through these conversations, especially, Betty, like when it comes to sex, and
Mhm.
and to be able to talk about these issues that may miss people. But I think your wheel is very powerful because it does speak to people individually.
Mhm.
Everyone can relate to take and give and serve, and
Mhm.
you know, and the shadow sides of all
and
those
yeah, I love
things.
the shadow side part of it.
I love the shadow side.
Yeah, because it's so
Brilliant.
important for us to look at, okay, where's my shadow? Right? Where do I fall on the wheel? And then
Mhm.
where do I have to be careful? Where do I have to look and own? So
Yeah.
that's beautiful.
It's so human.
Well, thank
Yeah.
you both for your time. I'll send you copies of the video. This will live forever on our YouTube channel. Um, and um, and thank you for anybody watching. Again, the majority of the people who watch this show watch the replay, especially now it's summertime and it's Friday nights and people can
Yeah,
go
and what the heck are you
out.
doing in here on a Friday night?
Yeah, people can go out again now. You know, when we first started doing the shows during pandemic, everybody was home and bored. You know, now it's like Zoom's not quite as exciting as it was. But a lot of people come and watch the replays, and there's just so much wisdom all three of you have shared, really. So thank you, thank you, thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you for having me.
And
Thank
have a
you. Thank
beautiful
you, Scott.
weekend.
Thanks for
See,
asking.
that's
Oh,
how you
and you
can
know
tell
what?
it's new age because we're doing this.
Yes, right. Namaste. Namaste.
Or I could,
No,
With-
I do want to actually do a little pitch for people watching. Tomorrow night's Saturday Night Live, and it's going to be a special one. And every Saturday Night Live we do a special and good. But tomorrow we are focusing on equality in relationships, social and racial justice. Antoinette Hall is going to be our co-host. Trish's teacher, Reverend Bridge Feltus, is joining us. And we're going to have also leaders from the indigenous world. Chief Reuben George, Chase Iron Eyes. Chase Iron Eyes was the primary attorney that won the battle of Standing Rock.
Wow. Yeah.
Alexandra
Great
Loves
speech.
is an amazing presenter. And music, of course, with Pato Bounton, who's going to be with us live.
Yeah.
Ray and Trish and I are co-hosting as well. So everybody join us tomorrow night for Saturday Night Live. It's going to be a very powerful and a wonderful show. All right.
Thank you, Scott, with your brown self, right? Yeah. I'm
No,
still
Nancy,
Nancy, I'm still trying. Nancy, I'm still trying to I'm still trying to see it's brown, but I maybe I'm colorblind.
Go get a tan.
maybe it's a
my Mediterranean will my salmon shirt. I just want to make it clear this is salmon.
Thank you, Betty, for your
Thank
time.
you. Good night.
Thank you.
God.
Good night, everyone. Thanks again.
Beautiful, beautiful.
Thank you, everyone.
Really great meeting you, Oshalla.
Bye bye. Likewise, Betty. Bye bye. We'll see each
Bye.
other again, I know.
Yep.